What do you want? Someone wants to be on the video? As I was saying, yes, fourth video. How is it going for you? Did you manage to absorb all the knowledge that I tried to pass to you on the last 3 videos? Let me know down in the comments because I need your feedback, alright? If you say that this is going too fast or this is going too slow or anything else, if you have any other ideas, just let me know and I'll try to adapt to make it easier for you because that's my goal here. I want to make this easier for you. In our last video, I showed you how to work with arrays and collections. For this video, I'm going to go a little bit further into collections, so we're going to talk about sets besides array. We're going to talk about how can you get data from the user while he types it. We're going to talk more about different kinds of loops. We're going to talk about exceptions and how to catch them. I hope you enjoy it. Since we started our code, we have been declaring our variables like this. So this is static. How can we make this dynamic? So for example, how can we make this a variable that a user can type? So how can we get the input from the keyboard of the user? Let's delete this for now. There's a class called scanner. You see, it's on Java U2, scanner. And you need to add what's gonna be the input that this scanner is going to scan. In this case, it's gonna be system.in. So what we're saying is create a new instance of scanner using the input of the system. And then we can do something like this. Type username. And then we do this, for example. User name is scanner dot next line. Let's run this and see what happens. So you see, type username, and then it's waiting for user input. So once I add John, for example, and hit enter, it says username is John. So scanner.nextLine is the one that gets what was typed. So I can, for example, create this string user and then do this user equals scanner.nextLine, and then here just say user. Next line will always return a string. You see here, a string. What happens if we want like this? So an integer, for example, age, and I want to set that. How can I set that? So type age, for example. Then I can come here and say age equals scanner. Let's do like we did there. Next line, we're gonna have a problem here. Why? Because next line it returns a string and we are expecting an integer. You see? We have 2 ways to fix this. One, you never saw it, but I'm gonna show you. The class integer has a method called parseInt. So what does it do? It gets whatever string you sent and tries to convert that into an integer. Age is age. Let's run this and see what happens. So username John, age 25. Username is John, age is 25. Nice. Let's run this again. John, and now when I have to type the age again, what's going to do? It's going to try to parse that string into an integer. What if I type this and hit enter? Then we get an exception. I haven't talked much about this. Exceptions are basically errors. Every time that during runtime you have a problem, an error, that the JVM throws an exception.
and usually the exceptions are named after exactly what happened. So in this case, number format exception for input string. So what it says is, hey, there's a format exception because this is not a number. I can't convert this into a number. So that's why we have those kind of exceptions. So I told you there are two ways to fix this. So one is to do this, trying to parse that one. But luckily for us, the scanner, it has, instead of next line, it has a next byte or next integer or next short. It depends on what kind of primitive type you're using. In this case, we're using integer, so we are using next int. So in this case, if you run again, John 25, it works as expected. So let's run this again. Username John, and again I'm gonna use a wrong one, so you're gonna have an exception. This is gonna be a little bit different exception, kind of the same thing but different. So now we have a input mismatch exception because we are doing different operations, right? Before we were trying to parse that string to an integer manually. Now we're just say, give me the next int. So in this case, when they developed the scanner class, they decided to create another exception that's going to be input mismatch exception. That's not nice when you just throw those errors to the client, is it? How can we be prepared that we are not going to show this to the user? Every time that you are doing any kind of operation that may throw an exception, we can try to catch that exception and do something about it. So for example, very difficult that we're going to have a problem here, right? Because it doesn't matter what you type it, it's a text, it's a string. But here we can have the problem because this needs to be an integer. So Java provides a way that you can catch and treat those exceptions. So what you're going to say is try, and then you're going to put the codes that you need to try, and you know that this might throw an exception. And then you just type catch. When you type the catch, you can put all the exceptions, or you can use a base exception that's called just exception. So let's call this exception. Okay, as long as we type everything correctly, nothing changes. At the moment that we have an error, the JVM will try to run this. This is not going to work, this is going to break, it's going to have an exception. So what happens? We don't want to print that exception, we want to print a friendly message. So we're going to type this input error. The provided value is not a number. Please try again. So we can implement a mechanism where we automatically retry. We are not trying to do anything about that, so not now. So right now, let's just say that as long as the user types it wrong, he has to start over, okay? So we want to abruptly end our software. We don't want to keep it running, so I don't want this things to run. So what do? System.exit 0. So in here you have to provide what's the status code. In this case, you're just adding 0 and you don't have to worry much about it. Do you see that we have an error here? Let's check what it is. Variable age might not have been initialized. Why? Do you see here? We declared our variable. And here we are setting that value, this value, to the variable. But what if it breaks? Because if it breaks, this line doesn't get executed. And then it's going to be here. So I can't print something that has not a assigned value. So in this case, I'm just going to add 0, for example. It doesn't matter, you can put whatever number you want. But the thing is, as long as you have the possibility that your variable might not be initialized, you have to manually initialize it here. Okay. So let's try to run this again. So type age, I'm gonna type this, we're gonna have a problem. Input error, the provided value is not a number, please try again. And it finished. So this is how you catch an exception. Of course, in a real world, you will not just like type an error and exit. usually what you do is you try to treat that exception as best as possible. At least you're going to log that information in your in either your database or a log file where you can check those problems before. Ideally, you try to make your method work even with that exception. If that's absolutely not possible, then we have other ways we can throw that exception, but I will talk about that later. But right now I just want to explain to you that exceptions exist and those kind of things can happen. So this is how you fix it. So you do a try, a catch. So once you get the exception, you can at least do something and show the user. Remember that red text that we had and everything? This exception class has many methods. One of them, for example, is to show the stack trace. Exactly that red message that appeared, just so you know, this is how you get that. So let's run John. So you see, now we have our message, but we also have this, and this is the stack trace. The stack trace, it traces where the exception happened and all the classes and methods that were executed until we got at that error. So this was the first line of code where it broke. That's our line 19. So if we check our line 19, here it is, 19, scanner next int. And then say, once you do next int, it calls the line 2212 of the scanner, and this one calls this one calls this one, this one calls this one, and then it throws the exception. So a stack trace, this is how you read a stack trace from the bottom to the top. And this is really helpful to try to understand where your problem is happening. So we can remove this and let's run one more time, but this time with no exceptions. 25, okay, everything works. Name is John, age is 25, no exceptions because now we don't have a wrong type here. But now you know how to treat exceptions, and this is how you do it. You can always do specific exceptions, so you can use, for example, a number format exception. And if you wanna catch different kinds, you can just repeat this block as many times as you need. So you have, for example, a null pointer exception. And you just add as many catches as you want, and it will always go from top to bottom. So first it's going to check if the exception is a number format exception, it will execute this. If not, it's going to check, hey, is this a null pointer exception? No, it's not. And then if you are really expliciting what kind of exceptions you have, you should always that's just a best practice. Then you should always have this exception, because you don't know what else can happen, what other kinds of exceptions can happen. So you may have a specific treatment for number format exception, you can have another one for null pointer exception, but if some other kind of exception happens that you are not expecting, you should have this catch exception, because all of those exceptions are a subclass of exception. So if you have a problem that's not, it is an exception, but it's not this one, neither this one, this is where it's going to happen. So this is the block of code that's going to be executed, just so you know. Okay, so we don't need this anymore. Let's just remove it. I'm going to keep my user. No, I'm going to keep my scanner here. So remember about our list. Still remember how we do that? List string users equals new array list. Import class. Yes. So let's say that I want to create a list with 3 users, like we have been doing before. How can we do that? Of course, we can always do this, users dot add, and then 2 and 3. But again, you already know, what if you have 2 million users? You're not gonna add 2 million lines of code. So what can we do? Remember that we talked about the for each. So for string users. Remember this? So this is going to iterate my list. So if my list has 10 users, it's going to execute the block that I have here 10 times. So this is a loop, a for loop. We have more ways to loop something. It doesn't matter if it's an array, if it's a list, if it's whatever. You can loop a lot of things with either for, or you can use a one that's called while. So while works expecting a condition here. So while this condition that I type here is true, it's going to execute the code. So let's try this. While users, and then what I want to do is I want to check while my list is less than 3 users, keep asking for an input. So how do I get the size of my list? Quite simple, users dot size. So while users dot size is lower than 3, then I'm gonna move this one here, and then I'm gonna add that. So users dot add scanner dot next line. So again, our list declaration, our scanner, and then we check. So before we run, let's do this mentally. Once it comes here for the first time, what's the size of my list? It's 0. There's nothing in there. Then this block is going to be executed for the first time. It's going to ask for the username. I'm going to type the first one, and then it's going to go again. It loops and say, what's the user size now? Oh, now it's 1. Do it again, gets the input, go again. What's the size? It's 2. Okay, it's still lower than 3. Go again, type the username, gets the scanner, come back again. User.size is 3. Is 3 lower than 3? No, 3 is equals 3. So that condition is no longer true. As long as this is no longer true, this is not going to be executed, and then it goes out of our while block. So let's just print our list here, and let's run again. Type username, John, type username, you see, again, Mary, type username, Zach. What's gonna happen now? You see? It executed this block 3 times, because that's my condition. As long as my list size is less than 3, keeps asking. So I inputted the first, the second, the third. Once I finish the third, this condition is no longer true. It keeps going. So system.out users, and we can see here. Remember on the last one that I told you that we have different kinds of collections, and we have lists, we have sets, and we have maps. Let's do a small experiment. So let's change a list to sets. Remember that I told you that lists and sets, they work kind of in the same way. So they are all lists of items, but the way they work is a little bit different. The 2 main features is that list keeps the order. So it knows which one was the first, which one was the second, which one was the third, and it allows duplicates. So it doesn't matter if you have the same username in the first and in the second position, for example, but set does not allow that. A set will not allow you to have duplicates. So let's try that. Before, let me run again and do one thing. Okay, so I'm gonna type here John, Zach, and let's type Zach again. So John, Zach, and Zach. Nice. Let's change this from list to set, import class. Instead of array list, this is gonna be a hash set. That's the most used implementation of sets. Nothing changes, just this. Because this is a collection, this also works the same way as a list. We still have the size method, and we also have the add method. Let's run this and see what happens. Type username, John, Mary, Zach. Same thing. Let's run again. But this time, this is the first, this is the second, the third one, I'm gonna add Zach. What's gonna happen? Again, Zach, and Zach, and Zach. and Zach. So here we are in an infinite loop. This will never end. Why? Because remember what I told you? That sets don't allow duplicates. So as long as it doesn't allow duplicates, my user size is never increasing. So my first position is John. My second position is Zach. When I'm about to type the third one is the same as the second, so it replaces it. And then this one replaces it, and replaces it, and replaces it. So it doesn't matter how many times I do this. Once I type something different, then it works. Zach, Mary, and John. So this is one of the biggest difference of list to set. Depends on what you do, if you want to allow duplicates or not, or if you want to keep the order, you should use either list or set. So in some cases, a list will be faster, and in some other cases, a set will be faster. It all depends on how your data is set, if you're just going to store that information, if you really need to search, that's probably when you're going to see the biggest difference between sets and array list when you have to search something inside. That the way the collections are implemented are different, so you have to bear that in mind. Nice, so you learned about a little bit more about set, you learned about scanners, you learned about the while loop, and you also learned about exceptions. Let's go for one last thing about if statements. So let's type a variable called int age equals 25. If age lower than 18, teenager, else adult. Let's run this. It is adult. If I add 15, teenager. Nice. There is a better way to do this, but keep in mind that what I'm about to show you, it's not to be used everywhere because it can get the code to be very difficult to read. Let's remove this. We don't need this for now. So first thing that I'm going to do is to add my, I'm going to add some enter here just so it makes it clearer. So age lower than 18, then this represents then in this case, teenager, otherwise adult. When we have those kind of expressions, it's always nice to add a parenthesis just to make it more clear. So what I'm doing is I'm printing, but this print, hope it doesn't get too complex with let's add some spaces here. So what happens is print something, but this print is going to be conditional. So we are adding an if statement, everything into one line. This is called the ternary if statement. So if age less than 18, then you're gonna print this string. Otherwise, else print adult. Let's see if it works. Adult. If I type 15, teenager. We just had 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 5 if we count all the brackets, and now we have 1 line. But as I said, depends on what you're doing, this can make the code quite difficult to read, so use this wisely. But I'm not gonna lie, this kind of if statements kind of makes it look professional. That's nice, but again, be careful not to make it too complex to read.
There you go, you finished your 4th video. I know that at the beginning everything is quite overwhelming and it can get difficult, but let me know how is it going for you? Did you manage to do everything? Did you manage to understand at least what I'm trying to say? All of these are the basics, and this is the foundation for Java and software development, so it's very important that you really know about that. But that's it for today. And please like, subscribe, leave your comments. Thanks for coming. Keep studying. See you next time.